All right. It looks like it was successful. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to Community Conversations with Dan Noyes and myself, Kate Donnally, and Senator Richard Westman has been gracious enough to join us this month, and it sounds like we might be able to rope him in for some months ahead as well. So thank you for joining us, Senator. So I'm just going to start with a little bit of intro, and the way we usually do this is some short intros, and today we're also joined by Ellen Hill, who is the head of the Lamoille County United Way, and I just wanted to give Ellen a moment in our introductions to talk a little bit about her work and what United Way has been up to over the last year, and then we just open it up for questions and answers and conversation, and we want to make sure to leave ample room for that. So before we get started, I think for those who've been here before, just a really brief intro. I think our hope is to create a space here once a month that's open and feels comfortable and feels safe to engage in conversations about the community and the things that we feel really passionately about. And so our hope is to really maintain a safe venue to do that. And there might be moments that we talk about issues that people feel very strongly and passionately about, and we welcome that. We want to be able to have those conversations. And I think in order to be able to do that safely, we just hope that people can engage in respectful dialogue and honor one another's positions and identities, which has not been in any way an issue to this point. So we hope to continue that streak. I will just briefly introduce myself, and then Dan, I'll have you introduce yourself, Senator Westman, and then if it's all right, Ellen, then we'll jump over to you, and then we'll kind of go from there. So Representative Kate Donnally, I serve alongside Dan Noyes, representing Belvidere, Johnson, Hyde Park, and Wolcott. I serve currently on the Judiciary Committee, and I will leave it there for the moment. Dan, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, Dan Noyes, not muted anymore. Human Services Committee, live in Wolcott, represent the same towns Kate does, Wolcott, Hyde Park, Johnson, and Belvidere.
And I'm Rich Westman, and I represent the whole county. Technically in my district is every town except for Wolcott, but I get all the calls from Wolcott too. And they somehow feel more comfortable with the Lamoille County Center than Essex, Orleans. Surprise, surprise. And my morning committee is natural resources. My afternoon committee is appropriations. And I also am on the joint fiscal committee, which when legislature's not in session, deals with some of the fiscal matters of the state.
Thank you. And so, Ellen, I want to be able to give you like this really glowing introduction because I've heard such amazing things about you and the work that you do. You and I are just now meeting virtually for the first time, so I can't give your bio. Hopefully you can give a little bit more about the specifics, but again, Ellen helps lead the United Way effort locally and does some really great work. And so that will be my intro. Ellen, if you don't mind, take it away.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Right, reputation sometimes supersedes reality. However, I'm a proud resident of South Cambridge. I've been here for 26 years. I worked in higher ed at JSC and NVU Johnson for 30 years and felt like I had a great ride there, doing a lot of different things, wearing different hats. Our Center for Service Learning, the Nonprofit Management Studies program, Workforce Development, Career Center, and was asked to get off the Hill and into the community. So now I'm the co-director of the United Way of Lamoille County. And I have to say it's a very exciting, challenging, fun job. There's a number of you I work with quite a bit. I also just want to give a really intentional shout out to both Senator Westman and Representative Noyes for their support along the way. When I have questions, I have concerns, I reach out and you're there in a lot of ways. And it's great to have such strong connections. And I've only heard great things about you, Kate. So it's great to meet you in this Zoom world. So I'll just give you a brief update of some of the things United Way of Lamoille County is currently working on. And also it's great to see these people and meet you virtually. A couple of our program areas, we have New Foundations, which is a transitional housing, 2 different homes in Morrisville, where we help support 5 families who are single parents with children. Right now we have 4 mothers with 6 children, and it's a 2-year-long program where they can reside for 2 years without paying rent, but they receive lots of financial education, life skill development supports. It's basically a wraparound support to help get them into secure housing situation. We have an emergency assist fund. We raised about $40,000 with the onset of COVID-19, and we've distributed that for people who have emergency needs up to $500. If it's home heating, they need a car battery, need a new pair of work boots, things of that nature. We have our infamous firewood project, where we've partnered with the state, started in 2008, where wood is gleaned from state forests, and we have many volunteers come together to block, split, and deliver, or people pick up. This year we've had 70 cords of wood distributed, and that really helps people. Yeah, Dan, I know this is your heart breath, one of your projects. And I think I just secured funding from the state to move that along. So thanks both Richie and Dan. That's been a bit of a struggle. We have some holiday programs. One thing I'm really excited about is we also own a barn in Morrisville. We're renovating it to actually gift to Salvation Farms to help their Lamoille Valley Gleaning Project. Probably some of you have seen our crazy polar non-splash. We've partnered with the Morrisville Rotary. And because of COVID-19, we've had to go virtual. And it's similar to the ice bucket challenge. People have done crazy things, from sledding down a hill in a bathing suit, in a kayak in snow, or snow angels, things of that nature. And so we've raised $17,500. Half of that will go to the Morrisville Rotary for them to continue their good work and service, and we'll receive half. And we're working with the Green Mountain Tech Center, their construction technology program, and they're finishing up a lot of the interior work. So that's a great partnership to have them use the barn as an educational site for their program. And one thing I'm really proud of, if I can have one more minute, is the entire region, Lamoille County, received a $315,000 grant from the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. It's called Working Communities Challenge, and its intention is healthy communities and strong economies. And we're looking at systemic barriers that are preventing people to get into the workforce and stay in the workforce. We're looking at barriers such as broadband access, transportation, childcare, substance misuse, and then workforce readiness. So we have 30 core partners from both for-profit, not-for-profit, and public. And it's a 3-year grant. And it's really exciting. United Way and Capstone are the backbone organizations of the Working Communities Challenge grant. So that's just a brief overview. We do many other things, but I'll pause there and thank you for allowing me to share some of the work that United Way is doing. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Anybody
It's really, really cool. And one of the things that stands out to me as you were describing those efforts is something that has been really powerful for me about our local community, is just how innovative and creative people have been, certainly over the last year, but I think that there was a foundation of that beforehand, of, you know, bringing all these different parties together to work creatively and figure out how to maximize all of our resources. And to my understanding, that's a big part of why not a lot of communities won that grant. And I think part of the reason that we stood out was because it was such a large, you know, integrated community effort. There were so many people at the table. I think that was a big part of it. So thank you for that. And I think what I'll do, rather than like have folks respond directly to you now, I think, if you don't mind, are you sticking around for the hour? You can just sort of be folded into like the question and answer section. Okay, cool. So I think we will just jump into that then. What we do is, if you are interested in asking a question or introducing yourself, because we have a pretty large crew here and not a lot of time, if you feel like introducing yourself in the chat section, you know who you are, like what brought you here, you're welcome to do that, no pressure. If you have a question and you don't want to turn on your camera or your mic, feel free to drop your question in the chat section. If you do want to ask your question verbally, usually the best method to do that is to raise your virtual hand. That happens a couple ways. For some folks, it's in the reactions section. If you click on there, it'll say raise hand. For other folks, if you go to your participants area on Zoom and click on that, it's at the bottom. There's a little blue raise your hand feature. So I will pause for a moment, and if anyone has questions, raise your hand or pop it in the chat.
Kate, this is Jack Will. I'm sorry I'm dialed in today, so I can't raise my hand. Yeah, I'm Jack Will, and one of my roles is working with Lamoille FiberNet CUD. And Kate, if it'd be okay if I can contact United Way through you to look at, I'm the member of the CUD that's looking at broadband equity issues, and I'd like to just connect up with the efforts that are looking at trying to make sure that there's equity, especially for underprivileged or people under stress. Over.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jack. Yes, just another piece about the Working Communities Challenge grant is one of the foundational points of it is racial equity. And we have the Racial Equity Alliance of Lamoille working with us. So I'd love to get in touch with you, Jack.
Don't forget Ernie's coming. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there a way to help facilitate that? I'm happy to share contact information after the meeting if that's what's most helpful. I don't know.
Yeah, Kate, I'll contact through you since I don't have the other access. And I'm also, ma'am, I'm also a member of REAL in the community group and community education for racial justice. Over.
Perfect. Thanks, Jack.
We just passed some legislation to build out broadband. A little, quite a bit of money, federal money that's coming through is going to be going out to the CUDs and out to the communities. So looking forward to see how that rolls out. It was just passed in the House last week. And so should be seeing that start to happen. Pretty important that we figure this out, definitely for that last mile.
Yeah, thank you to you, Jack, and the CUD and REAL. And again, like all of these different partnerships coming together, I think makes for some really good and comprehensive support to our community. Eric, I see your hand is up. Go for it.
I really didn't want to go first. I wanted to take the amount of time left at the end, but since no one else raised their hands, I had to go ahead. I'll try to be brief, but as you all know, brevity is not my strength, but I'll do my best. First of all, I want to say thank you to all the delegates. And I think you're all great people, and I think you're really dedicated to civic service. And I'm offering this preamble because I'm going to veer off some territory that I'm fairly emotional about it. And it's going to sound not nice, but it's, as a teacher, I understand when everything's going right, you don't hear a lot, right? But then as soon as there's a problem, the voices pile up. So you guys are, have taken, Dan, you've taken great votes on family leave and minimum wage, and Kate, I really respect your stances on racial justice and know that you're going to represent our community really well in those areas. But so it's in the area that where I have maybe a divergence of opinion or a need to advocate that I'm bringing it up. So you guys took a vote yesterday on Brian Cena's amendment. And Dan, one of my major flaws as a human being is my inability to resist saying I told you so. But I asked you about this in our pension meeting, and you said you wouldn't have a chance to vote on it. And you'd probably vote, but you'd probably vote for it if you did. And you did have a chance to vote on it, and you voted nay. So I was a little disappointed in that. And I know that it was brought up and there wasn't deliberation and it didn't follow process. And there were a number of members who voted nay who recorded that in the rationale for their vote in the House log. and I didn't see any of our reps offer that explanation. I also noticed, Dave Jacobone from Morrisville voted yay. I was pleased to that. So there's it's super frustrating because I think, we here in Vermont see a lot of, legislative action happen in Congress and DC that's super frustrating, right? There's some massive amounts of inequity being perpetrated there, particularly over the last 4 years. And we don't feel an ability to do anything about it. But now here on this issue, we really have an opportunity to address that inequity in a real way. So I just want to talk about two things about the pension issue that's come up to focus this. One of the measures in the proposal in the government ops was to basically incentivize teachers working longer. They're going to calculate your average retirement benefit based on your last 7 years of salary rather than your last 3 years of salary. Teacher salaries go up, each time they get a step. And so the longer you work, the higher you move up. And some teachers reach the maximum of the salary scale, and then they try to stay on that for 3 years until they reach retirement, and they can get the maximum benefit for their retirement years. So this is basically incentivizing teachers to work an extra 4 years, essentially, in order to maximize their benefit. Teachers aren't just gonna be like, well, I guess I have to take less. They're going to work longer to ensure their financial security. What that's going to result in is not cost savings for the pension plan, but just cost shifting to the school districts, right? Teachers working for an extra 4 years at the maximum salary is going to be a huge increaser of school budgets. You can talk to Kat Gallagher, talk to any principals in any districts. And I know I've talked to principals about budgets, and man, they look forward to that teacher at the max scale retiring because it frees up so much money. Teachers at the max end of the scale, depending on the school district, frequently make $70,000+. And the teacher you hire to replace them, sometimes the first year or teacher with more experience makes $45,000 a year. So, and if you have a whole district full of teachers who are sticking around at the top of the scale, that's just shifting the cost onto the school districts. But the other way I want to look at this for you guys is, I know the chair talked about the progressivity of their plan in the way it scaled the cutting back people's COLAs depending on the amount of benefits they had and stuff like that. And I would just like to take that progressivity lens and take about 10 steps back, right? Because, both of you, ran as Dems, and while I appreciate independence and representation, the Democratic Party platform in the state of Vermont calls on progressive tax rates. That's a major plank of the platform. And it also calls for rolling back the Trump tax cuts in 2017. This vote and the way we address this pension plan has the opportunity to do that. Because essentially, this pension fund gap is a fiscal problem created by legislative mismanagement and incompetence on this issue. And the solution that's proposed is a regressive one. It is essentially a tax increase on middle income, by definition, working Vermonters of the present, and then a penalty to the future elderly retired ex-employees of the state of Vermont, right? Those are all middle income, even lower income in the case of retired people, people who are going to pay for this in its entirety with the current proposal. The massive inequality that we've had in the state, inequality has been rising in the country. It's been rising in the state. There are a number of reports that have come out about that rising rates of inequality, and that the Trump tax cuts of 2017 resulted in $350 million in tax breaks for the top 20% of Vermonters in just 2018. Simply rolling back that tax cut would solve this problem on its own without changes to the pension fund, right? $350 million a year, that'd do it. In excess, right? So this is really an income inequality issue. The solution could be penalties to middle income and future retirees as proposed now, or it could be taxing those who have continued to get richer, who benefited the Trump tax cuts, who benefited from the pandemic. Every time there's an economic crisis in this country, in this state, such as the 2008 financial crisis, even the Great Depression, and now the pandemic economic crisis, money flows up, right? The wealthy, people invested in the stock market, are positioned to take advantage of these crises, and the burden is always put on working people. This is an opportunity to stand with working people and do the right thing. And I've not seen leadership from the Dems, from that speaker, from the chair that we really need. And so we need it from rank and file members like you guys to stand up and do the right thing. This is, we have a lot of blue people in this state, and there's a lot of performative actions that go on, raising a Black Lives Matter flag, but when it comes to, maybe paying for reparations or tax breaks for women and minority-owned businesses, it doesn't go through so smoothly. There's a lot of praise of frontline workers and educators through the pandemic, but when it comes to actually backing that up by taxing the wealthy to pay for the promised pensions that teachers were and state workers were promised when they entered the system, like now we're going to back off. That seems like a betrayal of the constituency you guys are pledged to represent. And I really think that the window needs to change on what we're looking at here. So I'd like to hear your comments about your vote and how you intend to move forward on this. There was some good news in the House Government Office. There was one person who was in favor of that. That was the CEO of North Country Federal Credit Union. So the millionaires have got your back here, but I think the rest of Vermonters would like to see something different.
Thank you, Eric. As always, I really appreciate your advocacy on this issue. And I'm happy to answer for myself first, and then can pass it on to others. So just for a little bit of background, and anyone can feel free to jump in if it feels like I'm misrepresenting this. So as I'm sure many of you know, the state is and has been facing a crisis essentially with the state and teacher pensions. And over the last few months, there was a report issued by the state treasurer, and the Speaker of the House has identified that this is a priority to address this and to try to get the pension back on stable ground. We did host a meeting with our local teachers that was live streamed, and if you want to watch that, you're welcome to. It's on my YouTube channel, which has been in all the emails that I sent out. So you could watch that conversation if you'd like to. And so one of the big topics of so the proposal that finally dropped this week, and government operations is the committee that is the committee of jurisdiction that's going to be looking at this and ultimately putting forward what they believe the best proposal is. So still no decisions have been made. And what happened yesterday was that there was a bill that was that had passed second reading, and it was on the floor for third reading, which essentially means it's going to be passed through the House. And Brian Chena, who is a member of the Progressive Caucus and co-sponsored by members of the Democratic Party as well, put forward an amendment that they wanted to tack on to this bill that essentially asked for a 3% tax on income or wealth. I can't remember how it was framed, but I think income over $500,000 a year that would be directly put towards the pension issue. And this is a central part of the discussion that keeps coming up, is that this question of revenue streams and revenue sources, and the proposal that dropped did not have anything, as far as I know, that looked at alternative revenue sources for covering this issue. Essentially what it proposed was $150 million from the state. Well, that's separate, but the state is putting $150 million into trying to cover this gap. And then a lot of what the proposal looks at is making up ground through changes to the pension system itself, which essentially is what Eric described. Changes meaning, extending lengths before retirement, changing income, et cetera, et cetera. So the reason that I voted no on the amendment is not because I don't support the concept. I strongly believe that we should be looking at alternative revenue streams as a method of resolving this issue. And I've made that very clear to Democratic leadership. The reason I voted no to the amendment is because I'm also a really strong believer in process. And I don't believe that that magnitude of tax policy should be decided on the House floor in the form of an amendment when committees haven't had an opportunity to take testimony, haven't had an opportunity to look, there are so many massive issues that are on our horizon: childcare, the state college systems, teachers' pensions, and in each of these, paid family leave, in each of these conversations, there's going to be this question of revenue streams. And in each of these conversations, I agree and believe that we need to be looking at progressive policy to address this, so that it's not sitting on the backs of the people who are most impacted by these policy decisions, and frankly, who I think are the most burdened right now with supporting our public good in the form of taxation. So, I could go on and on, but I will just say that I support the amendment in spirit. I've made that clear to leadership. I'm going to continue to advocate within the committee that we look at what that could look like in terms of alternative revenue streams. And I voted no essentially based on process, not based on content. So I will pause there and let Dan and Senator Westman respond if they.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, and thank you, Eric. And yeah, definitely really following this closely through the government ops testimony and what they're looking at, and trying to talk to the members that are on that committee to see what I can do to make sure that in the end we come up with something that is acceptable to the teachers, the state employees, and the taxpayers. And it's not going to be an easy thing for them to figure out. And I want to talk about why I did vote no on that amendment, because I've been working on another bill, the Office of the Child Advocate, like many hours over this last couple weeks. It's been in our committee. We've been taking lots of testimony on it. I've been working with Leg Counsel and a couple other members of my committee, and really putting a ton of work into making sure that youth who are in state custody or justice involved have the opportunity to transition to adulthood successfully, coming out of the DCF system. And I thought, could you imagine if somebody threw a floor amendment up that, like, all of a sudden would change the whole play thing that I've been working on trying to address? I mean, I don't know what that amendment would be, but I just tried to look at it like that. Like, I look at the Government Operations Committee as really taking a deep dive into this, something that I don't know. I can admit, I don't know a ton about how to solve this, but because I've been working on the Office of the Child Advocate and the committee work that I've been sponsoring, and to kind of push back a little bit, I do really care about the working class. And in fact, last week I had a bill pass that looks at how we compensate people who provide in-home service to older Vermonters. These are people that don't have a union. They work for very low wages. And, here we are saying, in my committee, we're really respecting their work. And this is all of the home and community-based providers, people that are providing services to people with traumatic brain injury or older Vermonters. And it's that in-home care that is so important for them to not end up in a nursing home. And so we passed out a committee, H153, that says, hey, state of Vermont, figure out what these services actually cost. Just don't make up a random number and pay home health or pay these providers. Who knows? It's definitely not enough when they're paying their employees $12 an hour, $10 an hour for part-time, and not giving them health insurance and not giving them anything. So I do care about the people that are providing these services, and I do care about people that are working. So I'll leave it at that. And I would vote for, and I hope to be able to vote for something that does have a designated revenue stream that goes into that. And I don't know what that looks like, but I also respect the Government Operations Committee and John Gannon, and didn't want to throw something on his lap at the middle of what they're working on, because I wouldn't appreciate it if someone did that to me. Thank you.
I'm not into what the intricacies of the votes were in the House this past week. I have enough problems dealing with my own votes in the Senate. We had a number of things over the last week to 10 days, including guns in hospitals that we've had to deal with, and a number of items like that. What I will say about the proposal that was floated in the Government Operations Committee and the two retirement plans, both state employees and the teachers. We have $1.3 billion coming from the feds in federal COVID money. The initial pieces in the House have 150 million of that 1.3 going to broadband. They also, in this proposal, talked about 150 million going towards pension funds, although it's kind of a sleight of hand because the federal legislation said no money towards pension funds. What the House did was they took $100 million out of water cleanup and, you know, for example, building of sewage treatment plants and that sort of stuff, and they supplant in federal money to 100 million of it and do a swap, and then they take that money out and they put it towards so I don't mean to correct Kate, but it really isn't state money. It's really federal money, only washed a little bit in how they do that. What I would say is I think that federal money in the 1.3 gives us a little time, and it gives us a little time to work through the issues of, and I'm going to give you my top priorities. My top priorities are, we need to make sure we do as much for the pension funds as we can, both state employees and that. Stabilizing the state college system. Move ahead with broadband and doing some help to middle-class workers and employees and help them through the rest of this crisis we're in. And that's where that 1.3 billion ought to be mostly directed in large part and go through. And I think what that does is gives us a little breathing time to make sure that these proposals, particularly on the retirement side, because we have a responsibility to those employees, that we do something thoughtful. I thought one of the piece that I was in the that bothered me the most about the proposal that was floated in the House Government Operations Committee is removing and this was on the state employee side, removing the VSEA from any of the decision-making process on underneath on the pension fund. There are presently state employees on the pension fund boards that make the decisions. Any decision we make around the pension funds has to include the teachers and has to include the state employees, or it's not going to be successful. So the idea of removing state employees from any part of the decision-making process removes them from buy-in, which I think is wrong. And so I hope this money gives us a chance to take a breath on those pension funds, take a year to work through this. I don't want to, stop that or pretend that we don't, but use this to give us time to come up with something that includes both state employees and teachers to get to a better place, because we all have a responsibility and need to have a stable pension funds for both.
Thank you, Senator. And if it's okay, Eric, there's a couple other hands up and we're at about 9:37, so I do want to move on. But thanks again for continuing to bring this up and continuing to have these conversations. I think it's really important and it's really helpful, honestly, as we navigate this process. So William, do you go by William? I see your hand. I see your hand is up. Did you have a question?
I've been called worse. You can call me Bill.
Bill, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Eric brought up a lot of issues, both financial as well as social. I'll pass on the social and just go right to the pension issue. I've been in the investment management business for 42 years. And the one thing I noticed is that in the past 40 years, the private sector, the corporate sector jettisoned defined benefit plans a long time ago because they're cumbersome, they're expensive, they invite corruption and mismanagement. And my solution to the pension system is not to continue to flog the taxpayer. And keep in mind, many of the taxpayers, the biggest demographic are the middle income people. My suggestion is to stop making promises you can't keep. I've never known a public sector pension yet that's fully funded. So I think the most expeditious thing you can do is on new hires, the younger people, don't include them on the pension system. I know there is a desire to continue to build the administrative state, and the more members you get, the more powerful that particular organization gets. But the younger people should be offered not a pension, but perhaps a simple IRA, a defined contribution plan, rather than a defined benefit plan. The defined benefit plan is expensive because you have to have actuaries who estimate interest rates, have to estimate inflation rates, estimate rates of return on the stock market. And basically all those estimates are designed to make astrology look respectable. So I think the more efficient way to do this is to have a cutoff whereby the people that have been in the system for a long time should get what they are promised. But the younger folks, it'd be a lot cheaper for the taxpayer to give them 3% match on their compensation every year and put it directly into a 401k plan or a defined contribution plan like a simple IRA. In addition to that, pension systems, pensions and healthcare are just the giant carrot and stick. A lot of people have to toe the line, so to speak, for fear of losing their pension or healthcare and putting their family at a peril. When you have money invested in a 401k or an IRA, the individuals, that's their money. They cannot lose it. It's theirs. It vests immediately. So the pension system is old. It's archaic. The corporate world has gotten rid of it a long time ago. It's very expensive, and it does invite corruption. Another term would be pay to play. I've put in RFPs, bids on public sector money many times, and the winner of the bid didn't win based on efficient expenses. They didn't win based on performance. It was because somebody had a political connection. So now you know my position on pensions. And I think the state of Vermont is one of the most expensive states to live in this country. And I know that coming from New Jersey years ago. You got to do something to take the heat off the individual in the state, because it's very expensive to live. Property taxes are high, sales tax, meals tax, prepared food tax. It doesn't make it easy for the small people to live. And this pension system is just a big white elephant. And I think there should be a cutoff where any new participants should be offered something different, like a defined contribution plan. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate you sharing your perspective on that. And I am fairly confident that there will be a fair amount of testimony taken over the course of this process on that discussion of why we remain committed to protecting and preserving a defined benefit program rather than pursuing a defined contribution program. That is the direction that we are prioritizing right now, is maintaining a defined benefit program in the belief that it does offer a level of security and financial security that defined contribution plans don't offer. But again, I think that we're all, from what I'm hearing from you, from what I'm hearing from many people, I think there's a universal desire to work towards a sustainable future where we can honor and protect the needs of the people working in our communities that contribute so much to our communities. And so, what that is going to look like, we don't know yet. And I hope that folks will track the testimony, and we'll do our best to reflect what that testimony is. I imagine that folks who know much more about finance than I do will testify to the difference between those two approaches. And it'll be interesting to hear the perspective that they have. I will pause there for a moment and let Dan and Senator Westman respond.
Sure. So definitely going to be some sort of a proposal coming out. I have no idea if that's something that the government ops is going to look at. But I think there's a lot of options on the table, and that definitely could be one of them. So I'll be interested to see what comes out. I mean, right now, what we're seeing is coming out. We're like in the middle of the process. So, if you looked at, I'm just going to go back to that Office of Child Advocate that I've been working on. If you looked at the bill I had last week and the one I got this week, there's a lot of changes. And, it evolves when we take testimony and when we hear from witnesses and try to figure out how to make this thing work for the state. So, yeah, I'll be interested to see what actually comes out, and hopefully along the way I'll be able to, sorry, my phone's ringing. So I'll leave it at that. I'm going to mute. Hang it.
He's done, I think.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Senator Westman. Somehow I got this thing where my phone rings through my computer now. It's like, I got to figure out how to stop that. Anyways, sorry about that.
You got the fancy Zoom screen filter, but you haven't figured out the rest.
Oh my gosh,
Senator Westman.
Don't ring through my computer anymore.
So, I think, we need to research all of these ideas. What I would say, though, is the defined benefit plan for somebody that in you pick an age that has taught for a fair number of years to switch to something else in completely is probably not going to happen. For somebody new going in, maybe we could give them a choice and maybe we can do that. But a defined benefit plan for somebody that is particularly within 10 years of retirement that is done that, I don't think there's going to be a switch around that. I personally, my retirement plan is defined contribution. And that's what I have lived with. And that's what, and I feel pretty good about. I've worked at VSAC now since the 1990s, and I feel pretty good about that. But I think that might be something that we could offer for people coming in. But I think if you've been teaching for over 20 years, to switch in the middle of that is probably a non-starter. So maybe that will be a piece going forward, but in the way we look at that.
Thank you. I did see one other question in the chat on a separate issue. We spent a good amount of time on pensions, but I see, Bill, your hand is up. Do you want to just say one last piece on that? Or?
No, I was actually just agreeing with Rich Westman's.
Cool. Thank you. And thanks for the comment and question. So in the chat, Jessica Bickford had posed a question about S25, which I believe is legislation in the Senate related to the cannabis market. I'm curious on S25 on the rationale of requiring towns to have an opt-in vote for retail cannabis. And on this one, Senator Westman, can I have you start off since it's a bill in the Senate? Is that all right with you?
Yeah, sure. I think that there's a lot of concern in a lot of communities about whether or not they should have stores or not. Everything from law enforcement to all. And I think the model that they picked is very much for, you're even reaching beyond me in my old age. But the model they picked was what Vermont had in the 1950s and 60s around alcohol, where you could have dry towns and not. And they wanted to leave somewhat of this a local control issue and let towns decide for themselves whether or not they wanted commercial opt-in or not. And at some level, when communities have issues that they think about that might be important, or say, for example, law enforcement, it gives the local community the ability to make a choice. And I think that, I actually think that's appropriate. Hyde Park might have a different decision than Morrisville or Johnson. And I think that community should have that right.
Jessica, I see your hand up. You want to jump in? And yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I totally get the wanting towns to opt in, and that makes a lot of sense. But S25 is actually requiring all towns to have a vote by next town meeting day, whether they're ready or not. And S25 is good that it really addresses a lot of the inequities that around marijuana and the cannabis industry. However, I think it might be creating another one by requiring a vote. When you put a hard and fast date on things, some towns might not be ready. We know that in the Lamoille Valley, we have a lot of, economic diversity as well in our towns. Some towns have law enforcement, some do not. Some use state police, some use the sheriff's department. Some towns have zoning, some towns don't. And so by having a hard and fast date, it just seems that you're pushing all towns to be in the same place of readiness at the same time. So that's really what my question was about, was that sort of hard and fast date, not about the whether there should be a vote or not. But and we know from our recent experience that most towns that put it on the vote actually, taxpayers do vote for it, because we have this, adult use substance that can be grown at home and legal, but there's no legal markets for people to buy it. So, so people are like, yeah, it's a no-brainer, right? We need to get rid of the black market, which, there's a whole separate conversation as to whether that actually goes away. But, I think just the timing of it requiring a vote by March of 2022 might be putting some of our smaller towns in particular at a place of inequity, because they don't have the resources to be able to support a retail market. But the taxpayers may say, oh, this is a great thing, let's create a legal market for something that's, legal for us to use. So that was my question. So, thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. Does that, Senator, do you have any
I would say
I'm happy to respond.
I supported S25 because I think it moved the ball ahead and was positive in setting up the structures around all of not everything in there is perfect, and I'm sure that when it leaves the House, it will be perfect.
That was sort of my follow-up question is, and I apologize for not, Jessica, honestly, you probably know much more about the trajectory of this legislation than I do. So it
will be coming to your committee, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's good in the sense, so that's good news, Jess, just because you and I will have an intimate understanding of this legislation within the next couple of weeks, and you and I can talk more about it as we sift through the testimony. It's just helpful to hear your thoughts on it, and I will carry those thoughts with me as we delve into some great and totally non-controversial legislation over the next few weeks.
Kate,
I don't know, Dan, yeah.
Kate, it's Brian Shackett, and I know our time's getting slim here. I just wanted to touch on two subjects. Some of you may know me as I wear two hats. I'm a correctional officer for the Vermont Department of Corrections, and I believe that, just briefly, I know we've touched on it for the pension, that Richard Westman is on the right track. I think that we need to have the union negotiate this or be a part of it. And this problem's been in existence for some time now, and I don't think it needs to be pushed through immediately or within a short period of time. It can be discussed and rectified, I believe, by intelligent people down there to the Capitol. And my other thing is, I also am a selectman for the town of Hyde Park, and I'm just wondering about the stimulus money and when will the town start seeing some of that money coming in? Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate those questions. And again, not to put you on the spot, but Senator, I'm wondering if you, having more intimate understanding of appropriations, would have a response to the question of municipal funding.
So my article in the local paper is on what the towns will be getting this week. There's 57 million that is dedicated directly to towns, and the money that is directed directly to the towns, it's all supposed to be used for COVID and emergency, except they're really pretty a lot more freedom around using the money for infrastructure, water projects, sewer projects, road and broadband. So there's, I would just say that there's also 120 million that is directed to Vermont for county government. And because we don't have county government, it looks like, and we took testimony this past week from the congressional delegation, that 120 million, and in Lamoille County, it's like 4.9 million, may be divided up amongst the towns, or at least the local piece. And I would think that, and there's some backup that you're going to need help in the towns from people to help with record keeping and help you with move these projects along. And both the League of Cities and Towns and the regional planning commissions are doing some of that work. My hope is that we do that in a way where we don't get state agencies, the league and the regional planning commissions duplicating efforts to help those towns. And I would think that I wouldn't expect the money in the next 30 days, but I would say probably by June you'll begin to see that. But that's only for me right now a guess at when that would come out. But from the sounds of it, it sounds to me like late spring, early summer.
Okay, thank you. Keep up the good work, Richard.
There was quite a bit of money in the T-bill that we passed this week, the transportation bill that just went over to the Senate for local roads, for municipalities. So,
but that's separate from
that's separate from the.
And there is a listing of, and I can't remember, but I think like Hyde Park is something like, it's between 250 and 290 that I think Hyde Park was getting, but that's only from memory in the list.
Thank you, Senator. And thanks, Brian, for the question and for your service in Hyde Park. It's 9:58 and I see one more hand up. So I'm gonna call on that person, and that's gonna be the last question or comment we take. Folks are welcome to bounce off if you need to be done at 10, but we should be ending in just a moment. Mark, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for all you're doing. I can't imagine the craziness of how many hours of your life get sucked into Zoom. I have a couple comments. One, I served on the boards of two businesses that I voted to keep pensions, and I lost that vote. And both of those businesses made up for the pension savings were really negated by the turnover in employees. All of a sudden, we lost so many employees. We spent so much training people. I think pensions have a place in the world if you want to keep good health, because both of those businesses regretted that. The second question I have is that Monday, the COVID vaccination is going to open up from people 50 to 60. I went on Thursday morning bright and early because I'm in that gap of 64, signed up, blah, blah, blah. I was excited. I was getting my vaccination on Saturday. I got a call on Friday saying it's been canceled. So, and then I learned, and they didn't tell me why, they just said it was canceled. What I learned was later on VPR that the site had been overwhelmed and they had booked people for vaccinations that really turned out to be tests. And so I hope you folks will really be on top of that, because Monday you're going to be swamped. There's going to be a 10-year age gap, which is probably a huge portion of Vermont is going to be really buried in it. They're going to want to be vaccinated. And because of my 1-day delay, it pushed me out 2 weeks into April to get vaccinated, which is neither here nor there. I can wait that. But I just think you got to be on top of the IT infrastructure there. Thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you, Mark. It's good to see you. I'm really sorry to hear that that was your experience, and thank you for the heads up. I hadn't heard about those issues yet, and that's helpful to know, and I will be making some follow-up contacts. To Dan or Senator Westman, do you have any thoughts or reactions?
I signed up. I went on it. I was on at 20 after 8 because it opened at 8:15, and there was only a line that said testing. I didn't click on that. I waited at 10:30. I went back on and I was able to sign up. I go in it on the 7th. But what I do know is Copley is pretty much ready to go at the VFW in Morrisville. They're doing 2 days a week. They right now are getting a 500 vaccine doses a week. They have informed us, and Dan and I are both on the board, that they can do easily do 1,000 a week the way they are, and they plan on gearing up to doing 1,000 Lamoille County residents a week. And they said if they were told they had more vaccines, they think they know how to gear that up to do over 2,000. So I'm sorry there was the glitch, Mark, but I think they're working to a pretty good place. If they're doing 1,000 a week, given what we already have, and I think we're approaching nearly 20% of the county vaccinated, that we're moving in the right direction. And I'm sorry about that gap. And I was quite frustrated when I tried to go on Thursday morning and it only said testing. And I said, well, I don't want to test, I want the vaccine. And it was quite a little frustrating.
I think that's the mistake that I made. I just said, I'm going for it. But I also, Rich, am getting vaccinated on the 8th at Copley. And I'm glad to give my money to Copley versus give it to Walgreens.
Well, I like giving my money to Copley too.
Thank you for supporting our local hospital.
Thanks.
But yeah, I think this is a conversation for another time, and it's 10:03, but I will just flag that I'm sure in many more of these community conversations, we'll be talking about state IT issues. It's whatever area you're interested in terms of what we do on a state level, IT is, we are operating on some pretty ancient technology in a lot of departments, and there's a lot of discussion of what it would take to get us up to speed. And just another one of those challenging issues that's going to require creativity and dollars. And so look forward to some more of those conversations as well. I so appreciate all of you for being here. We've had some really great turnout the last couple of months, and I just feel really grateful to live in a community of folks who are so engaged. So thanks y'all for being here. And I will just put Rep. Noyes and Senator Westman on the spot. And if you guys want to say your goodbyes, and we can go offline.
Great. Thanks everyone for coming, and
thank you.
Reach out anytime if you have any questions. Glad to communicate with anybody. So thank you.